The movie starts in Buffalo, where Dan is a top car salesman because he knows exactly how to win over customers.
And when you're behind the wheel of a high-performance automobile like this, no one asks those questions. They know you are that guy.
He's just been named Salesman of the Month again. His co-worker helped pulls up at the dealership, driving fast and showing off like he thinks speed impresses both cars and women. The rest of the team finds him a little strange. Dan leaves work early to celebrate his wedding anniversary. He loves his quiet suburban life with his wife and 3 kids, Nina, Kyle, and Max.
You thought I forgot.
Can you please tell Nina that we are not paying for her to follow Trevor to Iowa?
Don't say his name like that. Like what?
But not everything is perfect. Nina wants to change her college major and move to Iowa with her boyfriend, abandoning her dream of becoming a journalist, which upsets her parents. Kyle barely talks to his dad and spends most of his time gaming. When Dan tells him to take a break, Kyle heads to his friend Samir's house instead. Nina and Kyle argue over who should watch Max while their parents go out. Dan settles it by telling Nina to babysit and suggesting Kyle get out of the house for a bit. She agrees, though she suspects Kyle just wants to game at Samir's place. At Samir's, Kyle secretly hands over $200 to keep using a gaming setup in the garage. What his family doesn't know is that he's an online gaming star, known as Killboy, famous for his shooting game skills.
Sup, y'all? Killboy's back, baby. All right, here we go. Hold on, let me show you how it's done. Watch this. Give me the last one, guys. Come on.
Meanwhile, Dan and Jessica celebrate their anniversary at a carnival, like they do every year, while waiting for a roller coaster. Some young guys watching Killboy's live stream get so distracted that they let Dan and Jessica cut ahead in line. Dan loves the simple fun of the carnival, but Jessica wants something more thrilling. Dan promises to make their dates more exciting after an intense roller coaster ride. As he and Jessica share a kiss, a stranger takes their photo without permission. Dan confronts him, asking him to delete it, but the guy mocks him, posts it online, and hurls insults. Jessica tells Dan to ignore him, but things get worse when the man spills his drink on Dan and calls him weak. Dan holds back his anger and walks away.
Hey, come on, take it down.
Leave it. Let's...
Yeah, listen to your lady, Dan. Oh.
On the way home, Jessica reassures Dan that she didn't want him to fight. She knows he avoids violence, but deep down, she feels a little disappointed. At home, Dan changes their baby's diaper and finds Jessica already asleep in bed. Frustrated, he mutters that he should have punched that guy. Jessica laughs, but when she sees Dan's expression, she apologizes for laughing. The next day, Jessica lets out her frustration at a kickboxing class. She chats with a woman named Gwen while hitting the heavy bag, venting about her struggles with their teenage daughter. Gwen, visiting town to see her ex, listens until Jessica accidentally punches her in the face. They end up bonding over smoothies. Jessica admits she feels stuck in life. She once dreamed of traveling, but now everything feels routine. Gwen, a travel agent, hands her a business card before heading to the airport, offering a possible escape. Meanwhile, while shopping with their son, Dan notices a man watching him. When the stranger suddenly attacks, Dan calmly asks to put the baby down first, but the thug refuses. With his child in his arms, Dan takes him down anyway, shocking everyone around him. Dan drives home, sensing people staring at him. They know something's different. At home, he finds a hidden stash: guns, old passports, and piles of cash. Panicked, he calls Augie, an old associate, and demands fake IDs for his family. They're in danger. Augie warns him. His former boss, McCaffrey, has been searching for him, and that online photo might have given him away. Dan offers $500,000 for new identities and sets a meeting in Las Vegas in 3 days. Augie is stunned. Dan's family has no idea he used to be an assassin. He insists Dan tell them the truth, or escaping McCaffrey's mercenaries will be impossible. Ignoring the warning, Dan rushes to pack their things. He heads to his daughter's school, barging into an editorial meeting to find Nina. A classmate tells him she hasn't been the editor for months. Her boyfriend's influence, apparently. Dan pays $50 for her location and finds her under the bleachers. He's disappointed. She gave up on journalism. But there's no time for arguments. They need to pick up Kyle from chess club. Another shock Kyle quit, too.
How could you do that? You work so hard to become editor.
You don't even read my stuff.
Where is the chess club?
It's in the math building.
Thank you, Kelly. What now?
He's not there.
Next stop, Samir's house. That's where Kyle's been spending his time. Turns out, he's been paying to stream in the garage. Dan's frustration grows, but right now, survival comes first. Dan tells his kids they're going to Las Vegas and insists they act excited in front of Jessica at her workplace. He convinces Jessica to go on the spontaneous trip she's been wanting. She's unsure at first, but Dan's persistence wins her over. As they're about to leave, Dan notices a black SUV outside the hospital and urges Jessica to hurry. As they pull out, McCaffrey's men show up. Dan skillfully dodges them while making up excuses for his reckless driving. Realizing his car is being tracked, he speeds into his workplace and shuts the gates just in time. To stay undetected, he lifts the car with his family still inside. Under the car, he finds and removes the tracker just as the pursuers drive by, missing them completely. Then, spotting Hal about to test drive a car, Dan encourages him to go full speed and secretly attaches a tracker to Hal's vehicle. The pursuers take the bait. With 33 hours to Vegas, Dan's wife and kids excitedly post about the trip. Worried about being traced, Dan collects their phones, calling it a device-free trip, much to the kids' frustration. Without GPS, they rely on old-school maps.
Okay, solidarity, bye! Just freed our family from the shackles of technologies with the flick of my wrist, just like that. And trust me, it's gonna bring us all closer together. Just you wait.
Amusing the travel agency clerk, who hasn't seen anyone navigate this way in years. Dan hands over a stack of cash, telling him to book a hotel room in Las Vegas. On the road, the family finally bonds, singing Ice Ice Baby together. Even the parents join in, creating a rare happy moment.
Pretty impressive, huh?
How good is my problem? Yo, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while the DJ revolves it. Ice, ice, baby.
Meanwhile, McCaffrey shows up at Dan's house. His tech guy figures out that Kyle is actually the famous streamer, Killboy. McCaffrey immediately orders his men to track down the van. During a stop, Nina criticizes Kyle's gaming career, agreeing with her boyfriend's opinions. Kyle fires back, saying he misses the old Nina, the cool, independent one. While they talk, a girl recognizes Kyle and excitedly asks for a selfie. In a restroom, Dan practices how he's going to confess his past as an assassin to Jessica. Afterward, he goes to pay for the hotel. On his way out, he spots Kyle talking to the girl and is surprisingly impressed. Curious, he asks Nina why she called him Killboy. When he realizes Kyle is a famous gamer and that the girl will post her photo online, he lies, saying the hotel is full and they have to keep moving. McCaffrey hires a local biker gang to chase them down. As they approach a bridge, Dan notices 3 bikers closing in. His family, unaware, bobs their heads to calming music through their headphones. Dan quietly readies his silence gun. A bullet shatters his mirror, and he barely dodges a crash while trying to lose them. Only Max is awake, watching like it's a movie. He even hands his dad his milk as a weapon. Dan manages to take down one biker, then bumps another off the road, sending him flying. After driving all night, Dan finally gets some rest, but his family is wide awake. Nina, eager to visit the college she dreams of attending, insists on stopping by, even though Jessica isn't thrilled about going just to see Nina's boyfriend. When they arrive, the campus is alive with events and celebrations. Dan reminds Jessica that if they want Nina to listen to them, they should listen to her first. Taking his advice, Jessica decides to show Nina what college life is really like. A student, mistaking Jessica for a fellow student from behind, hands her a beer. Feeling nostalgic about her athletic college days, she shows off by doing a keg stand. Nina's real reason for visiting is her boyfriend, Trevor, who studies there. During a tour, Dan admits he's impressed by Jessica's energy. She wonders how her life would have turned out if she had pursued sports, and even tells Dan she's enjoying his spontaneous side. Meanwhile, Dan notices a suspicious German man on his phone and suspects he's working for McCaffrey. Curious, he strikes up a conversation. Jessica watches puzzled as Dan suddenly switches to German, clearly hiding something from her. Dan quickly realizes his mistake when a stranger suddenly attacks him. They fight in the chemistry lab, just as his family tours the area next door. After a brief struggle, Dan knocks out the attacker and hurries back to his family as if nothing happened. Meanwhile, Nina sneaks off to see Trevor, only to catch him cheating. Heartbroken, she returns in tears. Dan tries to comfort her with fatherly speech, but realizes she doesn't need advice. She needs action. So, he teaches her a simple but painful self-defense move. Fueled by fresh confidence, Nina confronts Trevor and uses the move on him, snapping a picture as he writhes in pain. Feeling empowered, she heads back to the van, appreciating her dad more than ever. As they continue their journey, the family grows closer. Nina, now feeling more like herself, considers reclaiming her editorial position at school. Jessica notices a change in Dan. He seems more adventurous, more like the man he used to be. She wonders if she had unknowingly made him suppress that side of himself. But Dan reassures her he changed because he wanted to, not because of her. The next morning, Dan calls Augie, who is on his way with their new identities. The only catch? Dan hasn't told his family yet. When Augie finds out they'll have to change their names and leave the country, he panics. He quietly returns the phone he had stolen and tries to brace himself for the tough conversation ahead. Meanwhile, Kyle finally opens up to Dan about his passion for streaming. It's not just a hobby. He's actually really good at it. He tries to make Dan understand just how much it means to him. Kyle wants to prove himself with a game of laser tag against Dan. He makes a bet. If he wins, he can start gaming again. If he loses, they'll play ball in the backyard for 6 months. The first to 3 tags wins. Dan, being an ex-assassin, has the upper hand. He quickly lands the first 2 tags and eventually secures the last one. Kyle feels cheated, but the game brings them closer. On their road trip to Vegas, they bond even more. Once in the city, they check into a top luxury suite. Before settling in, Dan heads downstairs to meet Augie, who provides him with new identities and one-way tickets to Vancouver for a steep price. Dan plans to finally tell Jessica the truth over a romantic dinner, while the kids stay in a suite, babysitting Max. He warns them not to leave under any circumstances. Meanwhile, McCaffrey's men are already tracking Dan. Kyle, being a well-known gamer, suggests visiting the HyperX gaming arena. There, he meets Ran, another famous gamer, who recognizes him from his streams. Ran invites Kyle to meet Valkyrie and other top players. Ran starts to connect with Nina and decides to skip the tournament. Valkyrie, needing a last-minute replacement for her team, asks Kyle to step in for the Call of Duty finals. As the match begins, McCaffrey's men close in. Ran confesses to Nina that Valkyrie's team doesn't stand a chance. But as her teammates fall one by one, Kyle goes into beast mode, wiping out the enemy team single-handedly. Dan tries to tell Jessica the truth at a fancy French restaurant, but they keep getting interrupted. Frustrated, he snaps at the waiter in French, something Jessica never knew he could speak. Turns out he's fluent in 2 languages. Instead of confessing his secret, he starts explaining it in French, knowing she won't understand. Jessica, completely clueless, just finds his voice sexy. He decides to delay the truth a little longer and takes her gambling. Later, he tries calling the kids, but no one answers. Worried, they head back to their suite. There, Jessica sees what looks like the kids sleeping, but they're just dummies, something Dan doesn't notice. While Jessica freshens up, a shadowy figure lurks in the background. She sets the mood with music and a fragrance called Love Mist. Thanks to the mist, Dan spots laser sights aiming at him just in time and dodges the bullets. Thinking fast, he grabs a bottle of Flecha Azul tequila, which, by the way, Mark Wahlberg invested in, shoots it, and sets the assassins on fire. But before they can celebrate, Jessica gets taken hostage. Dan drops his gun but secretly grabs a knife. The attacker calls him Sean, and suddenly, everything clicks for Jessica. Before the assailant can finish his monologue, Dan takes him down too. The shock is too much. Jessica throws up. When she rushes to check on the kids, she finds the dummies instead. But she remembers something the attacker said. HyperX. That's where they must be. They race to the gaming arena, where Kyle is just finishing a match with 30 kills. Dan and Jessica grab the kids, and Dan finally comes clean. The kids don't believe a word of it, until someone starts shooting at them. Taking cover behind a car, Dan handles the threat. This time, it's Kyle's turn to throw up. As they take cover, Dan finally reveals the truth. He was one of McCaffrey's mercenaries, responsible for 43 deaths. Kyle is furious, calling him a hypocrite for banning him from violent video games while being an actual assassin. It all makes sense now. Why Dan never wanted to leave the city or be on social media. He gives them new identities, but after 18 years of lies, his family refuses to forgive him. Jessica decides to leave with the kids. She calls Gwen for help, while Dan is left outside, waiting until morning. He warns Jessica that McCaffrey will come after them, but she simply tells him to make it safe and stay away. Jessica is shocked when she arrives to find Gwen waiting for her in a private jet. On board, Gwen talks about an ex-boyfriend from Buffalo who left her for another woman. Jessica realizes with horror Gwen is talking about Dan. Before she can react, McCaffrey appears. He calls Dan, showing him that his family has been taken. The only way to get them back? A meeting at an abandoned hotel. At the penthouse, McCaffrey greets Dan with a sarcastic hug, because he's not just an old boss, he's Dan's father. Meanwhile, McCaffrey grows suspicious when his tech guy turns out to be a huge fan of Kyle. Kyle, testing out a drone, quickly realizes Dan has serious tech skills. But there's no time to process that McCaffrey's men are coming. Dan tells his family to run to the roof while he stays behind to fight. Kyle becomes his eyes and ears, using the drone to track the enemies. Despite being outnumbered, Dan takes them on with skill and precision. The fight isn't over yet. McCaffrey sees the drone helping Dan and wakes Gwen up to track down the family. Dan warns his dad, but he doesn't listen. Somehow, even with 10 guys firing automatic rifles, no one hits Dan. Meanwhile, Jessica hides the kids and prepares to shoot as the elevator doors open. But Gwen? She just stands there, completely unfazed. She mocks Jessica, knowing she has the upper hand in a fight. Kyle counts 9 enemies left. Dan takes them down one by one, making McCaffrey proud. He finally shoots the drone. Meanwhile, Gwen and Jessica go head-to-head in a brutal fight. Gwen wins, leaving Jessica buried under rubble. McCaffrey knocks Dan down, aiming a gun at him. But instead of pulling the trigger, he starts ranting about how family made Dan weak. Gwen traps the kids, which gives Jessica the strength to break free from the rubble, only to get tossed around again like a rag doll. Dan secretly removes the bullets from McCaffrey's gun, forcing a fistfight. Nearby, Jessica grabs a bamboo stick, tries an acrobatic jump, and completely fails. Gwen laughs until Jessica launches a stick like a spear. McCaffrey overpowers Dan and grabs a gun to finish him off. But just then, the family barges in. Nina, excited to see her grandpa, suggests they all try being a normal family. The distraction gives Dan the opening he needs. The family reunites just as the police arrive. 6 months later, Nina becomes a famous journalist by exposing McCaffrey's assassin group. Dan starts a security training company and hires Augie. Jessica becomes a coach, and Kyle keeps making online videos. The family packs up their RV, ready to take Nina to Stanford, officially embracing their new tradition. No phones allowed. And yeah, I know Kyle was playing Valorant. I called it Call of Duty on purpose just to see who would notice. If you like this recap, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe.